Hello and welcome again to the Reporter's Editorial Board candidate interviews for candidates in the November 2012 elections. This is our board's chance to hear from each candidate in order to help us determine who we're going to endorse. I'm Managing Editor Robin Miller, and serving on the board with me are Opinion Page Editor Karen Nolan and our at-large reps Ernest Kimmey and Mike Connor. Today we're interviewing the candidates for the newly redrawn Congressional District 3, incumbent John Garamendi, the Democrat, and Kim Vann, the Republican. And welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to start by just allowing you each a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to represent us in Congress. And John will start by virtue of the fact that you're sitting closest to me. It's not scientific. So.
Well, whatever, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity to answer the questions and to explain our positions on some really, really critical issues that face this nation. I have been so fortunate. I've had a marvelous, marvelous journey in public policy. The years that I've been able to spend in the California legislature as insurance commissioner, as deputy secretary of the United States Department of Interior, and as lieutenant governor have given me a background that is really unique and provides me with the opportunity to engage on the critical issues that confront this nation. Whether it's an insurance issue, health insurance, other kinds of issues, I happen to have the experience to bring to the Congress a very unique perspective that is not shared by any others. Also, when it comes to environmental issues, land resource issues, mining, oil exploration, all of those things, as Deputy Secretary at the United States Department of Interior, I was able to engage in all of those, and specifically in the water issues here in California, which are absolutely crucial. You know, they want to build a tunnel under the Delta that will destroy the Delta. No way, no how. I've been involved in that fight for more than 30 years protecting the Delta, and it just cannot happen, and I'll do everything necessary to see that it does not happen. On education, I was a regent. I was also a trustee at the state university system, understanding the necessity of making certain that our young men and women have the best education they could possibly have. And on tax policy, I was chairman of the Joint Tax Committee here in the California legislature, and doing major reform of tax policy, taking that experience to Washington, where I've been able to vote on reductions in taxes for 97% of the people in this nation. It's been a marvelous journey. I thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you, John. Kim, tell us a little bit about you and why you want to represent us in Congress.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to the editorial board and for you for doing this. It's so important that we're able to be here and answer the questions and really address the issues that voters in this district care about. I was born and raised in this congressional district. I've had the privilege of being a county supervisor up in Colusa County. During the same time, I've also been in the private sector. I understand what we need to do to grow the economy and to create jobs. Now, I have this wonderful 9-year-old son that means everything to me, and I decided to put our collective lives on hold to run for this office because I do not believe that the future we are creating for him is the best we can do. We need to start getting government out of the way, start toning down some of these overreaching regulatory policies, stop spending stimulus dollars with foreign companies, and start spending that money back here at home. Being born and raised in a farming community, I know the importance of water. I've sat on the sites, JPA, for a number of years to promote and create new storage options and create a new supply of water so that we don't have to look at options like the peripheral canal, which I do not support. Now, being in the private sector, I'll bring a unique perspective to this office. With the combination of local government and my private sector experience, I know what to do to grow the economy and to get jobs back into the 3rd Congressional District. We've had a mass exodus of employers, specifically in Solano County. That doesn't create more opportunities. That creates less and less opportunities for our citizens, and we need to do a better job of creating opportunities and growing our economy so that the tax base can grow and so that we can continue to provide all the services that we need to provide for our citizens. Thank you again for having us here.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll start into our regular questions here, and since John went first on the last, Kim, you'll go first here. The economy is a huge concern. What do you think Congress should be doing about it?
Well, I think the economy and jobs is our #1 concern, and that's where we need to focus. We need to start getting government out of the way. The federal government should not be micromanaging every aspect of our lives. We are not creating fair regulatory policies. We are not creating a taxing system that businesses can understand and grow in. I've been visiting with businesses throughout this district, one specifically in Davis a few weeks ago, which is a software engineering firm that designs medical software. The cost of their insurance has gone up over $3,000 per employee. Instead of investing in their business and growing their business and hiring more people, they've decided to hold off and wait because they are so uncertain of the future of this country. They are so uncertain of what taxes they're going to have to pay next year and what their health care costs, let alone new regulatory things that will be coming down the pipeline. Look, in the last couple of years alone, there's been over 100 new regulatory policies that cost over $68 billion to our businesses. You know, Cobart Industries has left Solano County. MB Transports, Genentech moved half their businesses to Oregon. There's a reason why people are leaving California. And if we don't get good leaders in Washington to stop this, businesses are going to be leaving this country just like they are leaving Solano County and California. And we need to get a handle on this and set a good tone so that the businesses know and trust that they can grow and expand opportunities for our people.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garamendi?
We can grow the American economy, and in fact we have. We need to understand that in the 2008-9 period, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month as the economy crashed, largely crashed because of a lack of regulation of Wall Street and the mortgage industry. We now have in place a very good piece of legislation that does regulate Wall Street and brings it under control. The other part of it is, in the last 30 months, we have seen a continued increase in private sector jobs. Continued for the last 30 months, including this last period. In addition to that, the reason that we've not seen overall economic growth is that the government sector has been shrinking as states and counties and other municipalities have reduced their employment. The President proposed the American Jobs Act more than a year ago. Had that been passed by Congress, we would see an additional 2 million jobs. There was a large portion of that had to do with tax relief for businesses. In the 2011 period, we voted for tax relief for 97% of small businesses across this nation. That is now in place. The stimulus program actually worked. It brought $15 million of support to Colusa County. And in Solano County, we also saw a lot of things happen here at the air base. We saw a new runway being put in. We saw the paving of Interstate 80 in Fairfield. All of this was part of this stimulus program. We can build, and finally, the point that I want to make is that as part of the Democratic team, I've put together what we call Make It in America, rebuilding the American manufacturing sector. My legislation, which we call Make It in America, would require that every one of our tax dollars from gasoline and diesel taxes be spent on American-made equipment, and that our solar and wind systems be American-made. We can make it in America when we rebuild our manufacturing sector.
Okay, thank you, John. Question 3 will begin with you, John. You've been pushing this Make It in America plan for 3 years. Why haven't you been able to get it through, and why do you think you will be able to do it this time?
Well, the Make It in America agenda is not just my legislation, which would require that our tax dollars be spent on American-made equipment. We have had for years what we call Buy America legislation. Unfortunately, there were huge waivers, holes in that legislation that allowed municipalities and other districts to simply ignore the Make It in America requirements. We've actually seen a tightening up of that. Working with the Department of Transportation, I've been very, very successful in getting them to no more waivers. No more waivers. And so the 65% American content is now in place. My legislation would require 85% American content. Why hasn't it been passed? Because the Republicans control Congress, and they have done everything they possibly can to prevent job-creating legislation from passing. The American Jobs Act that President Obama proposed got no hearings at all. except one piece of it, and that had to do with veterans. No other part of that legislation, which was education, research, infrastructure, $50 billion of new infrastructure, and by the way, totally paid for, no increase in the deficit, didn't get a hearing in Congress. My legislation, along with the President's, simply has not been heard. But working within the administration, using regulations, we have been able to increase the American content by eliminating the waivers.
Okay, Kim, what specific proposals do you have for fixing the economy that you plan to offer? And as a novice representative, why do you think you can be more effective at getting legislation passed?
Well, let's talk about Make It in America first. If the goal is to make sure that American companies are providing the goods and services to public entities that are building things, then we should not have invested several $billion under the stimulus program in foreign companies. There's no reason at all that any federal stimulus money should have gone to foreign companies for green energy projects in this country. If your number one goal is to do it in this country, then you put actions where your words are. And that's not what has happened with the stimulus bill. So saying you want it made in America is not what happened with the stimulus bill. None of that money should have went overseas. Second, we're addressing this with another Band-Aid. We're addressing the issue as why American companies can't be successful manufacturing goods and services in this country and why we have to mandate them to do it in a certain way. If we address the wound instead of putting another Band-Aid on it, which is getting companies to grow and expand their businesses here in America, then we don't have to continually add mandate after mandate and regulation after regulation on top of these businesses. We have got to fix the climate so that the businesses in this country can grow and expand and want to stay here. Second, I'm not exactly a novice at this. We, in our county, were able to get the government out of the way and have one of the largest power plants that was built in the state of California built in our county. 690 megawatt cogen natural gas steam recapture power plant. We were able to do that by partnering with the private sector and making sure that we got everybody at the table early on so that we could grow the jobs, allow the energy company to do what it needed to do to build its power plant, and stay off the federal and state regulations that would have stopped the power plant from being constructed in the first place. So again, we go back to getting the government out of the way so that the private sector can flourish.
Okay. Kim, this question starts with you. 1%, 99%, 47%, which are you? And how would you represent the others?
1%. Well, I'm a county supervisor, so I guess I'm part of the 47%. I've been in the private sector for about 12 years, so I guess I'm part of the 99%. I live in a subdivision in Arbuckle, so I'm not a part of the 1%. That's probably the only part that I'm actually not a part of. Look, you know, public service is a noble calling. It really is. It takes a tremendous amount of work to run for office, and I applaud anybody who's willing to do it because it really is difficult. But I think you need to bring with that some private sector experience. We have got to grow the economy, and we have to grow jobs. That is the core of what we all need to be talking about and what we all need to be looking at towards our future. We can't continue to chase, like I said, businesses out of the state and businesses out of the country because things aren't going to get any better. The only way we grow the tax base is by growing the employment base and by allowing businesses to grow. Then the tax base grows, then our counties flourish, and then our communities flourish and our cities. So I would say that I have one foot in the 99ers and the 47%. But, you know, folks, people are suffering. But, you know, our neighbors are suffering. You know, my home has been devalued by probably about half. You know, the business that I was in prior to running this seat was probably cut by 3/4. You know, things aren't getting any better, and that's why I decided to run for this, and that's why I would be a good representative of everyone, probably everyone other than the 1%ers.
All right, thank you. John?
Well, let's be very clear about one thing. In the previous question, the issue was raised about the stimulus. Actually, the stimulus portion of it did require that your tax money be spent on American-made equipment. And here in this region, Siemens opened a factory in Sacramento to build 70 locomotives for Amtrak, 100% American-made. So it does make a great deal of difference what you write into the law. If I have my way, and I can get Congress and the President to agree, 85% of your tax money would have to be spent on American-made equipment, whether it's transportation or if it happens to be those solar and wind systems, which are critically important in this area. Keep in mind that the Republicans are now blocking the extension of the production tax credit, which has created the wind industry here in Solano County. Blocking it. 16,000 jobs were lost last month because the wind turbine companies that are now manufacturing the wind turbines in the United States are no longer doing so. Now, with regard to the 47%, let's be very clear about this. The Ryan Romney Republican budget, which passed the House of Representatives, decimates the 47% on educational spending. Huge cuts, Pell Grants, increase in student loan fees, all of that is in that. Research programs decimated, energy research, agricultural research here in this area. The University of California, Davis, is critical in agricultural research, but yet the Ryan Romney Republican budget, which did pass the House of Representatives, decimates research in every single category. Medical research, critical to our personal well-being, decimated. In addition to that, infrastructure programs gone, and the tax portion of it actually increased taxes on the middle class. $1,000 a person, a family would see a tax increase because of the Ryan Romney Republican budget. And if you happen to be a millionaire with $1 million annual income, oh good, you're going to see a $160,000 reduction in your taxes. That's the wrong way to go. And that's why this is a critical election.
Okay, John. 2 minutes. Thank you.
I still want to know what if John's in the 199 or 47.
Do you consider yourself in the 1, the 99, or the...
Well, it's very simple. I am not in the 1%, not in the 10%. We've been very fortunate in our life. I am a rancher. I've been a lifelong rancher from the very early days with my family's ranch, which goes back to the 1860s here in California. And this morning and late last night, I was up with a very sick cow. It is calving season on our ranch, and so we're taking care of the cow and the calf. I understand what it is to be in the middle class of America.
Okay, well, along that line, John, did you see the Washington Post report this weekend about wealth in Congress? And John, is there anything you would like to clarify about its estimate that your wealth has increased 138% since you went to Washington? And Kim, when the question comes to you, did you see the report and do you have any thoughts about it?
Actually, I did not see the report, and I'm trying to figure out the difference between wealth and income. We did have an increase in income this last year as a result of my wife's mother having died and the estate being distributed. But that's a one-time thing, and that's over. In any case, I don't believe the property values have gone up where most of my wealth is in the ranch that we have.
Kim?
I actually didn't see the article either, but, you know, coming from a small community in Colusa County and having worked in and out of the private sector since I was about 12 years old. I think my first job was flipping hamburgers at a gas station that had a short order counter in it in Arbuckle. I understand what people are going through, and it's very frustrating to see our elected officials take pensions from one part of their elected career and then take high salaries from their next part, and then to see their general, overall wealth going up. It's very frustrating. A gentleman who recently had a commercial, one of Mr. Garamendi's colleagues, I think it's Mr. Barra, has committed to not taking a pension or a pay increase as long as the financial house is not in order. But when we see these large pensions going to elected officials who've been in office for 20, 30, 40 years, it's very concerning to the public, and I understand that. Running a county, I run a county that doesn't have a CAO. We make approximately $35,000 a year, and I can guarantee you we put between 40 and 60 hours of work a week in it. And that work I am so proud of. We've been able to do such great things in my county and grow our economy. We're one of the only counties in this state that has actually had net growth since 2007. And that's pretty unheard of. We haven't had to lay off or furlough one county employee during this time because we made good decisions. We didn't spend ourselves into oblivion when things were good. We kept control of things, and when times when we needed to tap into our reserves, we were able to keep our county whole. And we've been able to keep our economy growing in the county because we have allowed the private sector to grow. So I'll make sure and take that with me to Washington. But like I said, we just really need to address how our elected officials are taking pensions.
Okay. Kim, during their conventions this year, the Republicans and the Democrats adopted party platforms. Have you read your party's platform? And do you have any reservations about it? And if so, what are they, and how will you handle that disagreement with your colleagues?
Well, I have not read the party platform. I will admit I've been focusing on running for this seat because as a county supervisor, I was elected to a nonpartisan office. I did not attend the convention as well, and as most of the folks in this district, and some of you may know, I've not always been aligned with everything that my party has been aligned with. I'm running for this seat to represent the people of the 3rd Congressional District, not a party. And I've been doing that for 6 years as a county supervisor. So I will keep focusing on what's best for the people in this district. And you can look at my record. I'm the chairperson of the Regional Council of Rural Counties. That is 31 counties in the state who belong to the Rural Caucus. They come from both parties and everywhere in between. And they appointed me as their leader to lobby on behalf of them for state and federal issues because they knew that I would put the interests of the rural communities first, not a party affiliation first. You know, my colleague to the right, has been ranked by the National Journal as the 17th most liberal member of Congress with the 4th most liberal voting record. Now that's voting party lines every time. I have a record of not doing that, and I have not always been the party darling. So I'll keep focusing on what's best for the constituents of the 3rd.
Okay. Thank you. John?
When you're a member of Congress, particularly a Republican member of Congress, there's a lockstep going on. And keep in mind the Ryan Romney Republican budget, which lays out very clearly what is in the Republican Party platform. Bad for women, seriously bad for women. We're talking about anything that a woman would need from contraceptive to other medical services, not available. Tax policy, we're talking about a tax policy in the Republican platform as well as in the Ryan Romney Republican budget, which passed with a unanimous Republican vote, would decimate education. The platform does that similarly. What happens is that every representative in Congress is not free to vote on anything they want, and particularly so in the Republican Party. I am often at odds with the Democratic Party platform. Yes, somebody did do an analysis, and they picked and chose certain votes to show what they wanted to show. But you'll find that, for example, I voted against my party on regulations having to do with agricultural dust, and similarly on some tax policy issues. The point here is that the Democratic proposal and the Democratic budgets and what we have voted on in Congress is specifically designed to build the middle class, specifically designed to rebuild the American manufacturing sector, and to make sure that we have adequate resources for our national defense. In the Ryan Romney Republican budget, there is a significant commitment to the Karzai government, that the United States government would protect the Karzai government in Afghanistan at any cost and increase the American involvement in Afghanistan by some 40,000 soldiers, an indefinite commitment to that failed situation. We should not be doing that, and I voted against doing that.
Okay. Starting with you, John, if you are, if you are winding up, if we, I got to learn to read again. Okay.
It's okay.
If we're winding up our overseas military operations, it seems logical that the military budget won't need to be as large. How will you balance cuts to the military while protecting the district's interests at Travis and Beale Air Force bases? Or do you support growing the military budget or leaving it as it is?
Thank you. I'm on the House Armed Services Committee and have been for the last 2 years. An extremely important position, one that is critical to this area. Fortunately for this area, Travis Air Force Base is mobility, moving men, women, equipment, and supplies around the world, both for military purposes as well as for humanitarian purposes. Beale Air Force Base has an equally important function, and that is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, watching, looking around the world, using the various aircraft that are available from U-2 to the Global Hawk, and making sure that we know what's going on. These are two of the most critical elements in any future mission and any future vision of where the military will be. Therefore, my task has been on the House Armed Services Committee to make sure that these two critical Air Force bases, critical to the national defense and critical to the economy of this region, have the resources that they need, and that the missions are there. Right now we're working on the KC-47, that it is going to, should be positioned at Travis Air Force Base, both for maintenance as well as for training and the utilization of those tankers. Similarly, at Beale Air Force Base, making certain that the Global Hawks remain at Beale and that the missions are expanded with the other programs that are possible, specifically a program utilizing the California National Guard to run one of the airplanes that is that could and should be based at Beale Air Force Base. Using my position on the House Armed Services Committee, we've been successful thus far, and I would expect us to continue to be successful.
Well, I actually agree with most of what the Congressman said. You know, Congressman Herger has been representing the area that Beale is currently in, and Beale and Travis will now both be in the 3rd Congressional District. And I think one of the most important things we need to look at when we're talking about the budget for the armed services is where our representatives have stood on sequestration, where our representatives have stood on BRAC. You don't wait for BRAC to come to you. You're aggressive and make sure that the external impacts that bases feel, whether it's from state regulations or local regulations, are being dealt with early, so that when the commanders are together deciding what bases are going to be put on the list and looked at first, we make sure that we're being proactive up front to stay off some of those local constraints that start encroaching on our bases and impacting the decision that's made about BRAC. Now look, you don't play political football with our national security and with our bases. Sequestration was the classic example of that. You don't vote to have it put on the table and say it's never going to happen, then don't show up to vote when it's being addressed. My colleague to the right of me did all those things that I just described. You don't put our security, you don't play with our national security. Just because something has not happened to us at home on our soil does not mean we are any safer than we were 10 years ago. We need to continue to be proactive. And the biggest threat to our national security today is our economy. And if we do not start proactively addressing these issues, we are not going to be in a situation to be just talking about these bases, but we are going to be talking about our national security as a whole.
Okay. Kim, automatic and potentially devastating budget cuts, the so-called trigger cuts, will take place in January unless Congress acts. What do you think should be done about that?
Well, I think having a super committee of 8 that just looks at a bottom line budget number isn't the answer. You know, we've elected 435 people to Congress. We should make sure that they're all doing their job. We can't just make arbitrary cuts at a bottom line, because that's what we need to do to get to a certain number. And like I addressed with sequestration just a moment ago, that's one of the examples of that. We need to look at everything as a whole. We need to put priorities in place. What do we want the role of the federal government to be in our lives? National security, of course, but we have to start looking at all of the micromanaging things that we have now asked the federal government to do and what that is costing us. Is the cost benefit really there of all the things that we've asked them to do for us? And start peeling some of those things back and looking at what the real role of the federal government should be. And again, like I said, you can't just take an arbitrary red pen and start marking off numbers and saying, well, we're just going to cut this across the board, we're just going to cut this across the board. We've never done that with our county budget, and I would never do that with the federal budget either.
There's a few things that need to be addressed here. First of all, the issue of sequestration actually came about because of the Republican Congress refusing to extend the debt limit for the United States and bringing the United States very, very close to not paying its bills. This happened a year and a half ago during the summer. As a result of that position that the Republican Congress took, the sequestration issue was put together and a super committee was formed. Unfortunately, the super committee did not come to an agreement, principally because Mr. Ryan, who now wants to be vice president, refused to go along with any tax increases at all. If we're going to deal with the deficit, you're going to have a balance between cuts and tax increases. My position is supporting tax increases on the super wealthy and ending the tax benefits that the oil industry and other very favored industries have received over the years. Now, with regard to ending sequestration, there have been 3 votes on ending sequestration. 2 of those 3 votes I supported. Ending sequestration. The last one was a game put up by the Republicans in Congress so that they could do a little gotcha as we run up to the election. I did not vote on that piece of legislation. However, it's very, very clear in the work that I've done on the Armed Services Committee that I'm into the details about how to make appropriate cuts, where to put our money so that we can actually have the strong military that we need for national defense and to position the United States in its appropriate role as the world leader. Those things have been done. Also, with regard to tax policy, extremely important part of this, we're going to have to deal with the deficit in a balanced way. Thus far, the Republicans in the House of Representatives have refused to go along with any tax increases at all, except on the middle class. In a budget, in a bill that passed unanimously by the Republicans, total opposition by the Democrats, that would give an enormous tax break to the super wealthy and put the burden of at least $1,000 for every family, every working family in the United States. That's bad tax policy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, John, this question starts with you. Where do you stand on the peripheral canal/tunnel plan in the Delta, and what do you propose to do about it?
I have represented the Delta since 1974 when I became an assembly member representing a good portion of the Delta. And I've continued to represent the Delta virtually every year since that time. The Delta is a critical habitat, agricultural, economic engine for this entire region. In 1982, Governor Jerry Brown proposed and passed through the legislature over my objection, I was then in the California State Senate, a peripheral canal proposal. Sonny McPeak, then a Contra Costa County supervisor, and I put together and led the fight to defeat the peripheral canal. We had about 80% negative vote in Northern California opposing the peripheral canal. I led that fight then. No more than 9 months ago, Governor Brown was back in Washington saying he was going to build the peripheral canal. I told him, no, you won't. We beat you in 1982, and we will win again. Whether it's a tunnel or a canal, it will destroy the Delta. It is sized so that more than 50% of the year, literally all the water in the Sacramento River would be sucked out and sent to Southern California. No way, no how. Now let me point out that my opponent has received over $40,000 in contributions from the Westland Water District farmers and their PAC. Where do you stand on these issues? Where do you stand? Are you willing to stand up and fight for Northern California? Northern California is in jeopardy here because these proposals clearly are designed to take around 1 million acre-feet of water away from Northern California water interest. Those who have prior water rights stand to lose if this goes through. And do keep in mind that the Republican Congress, together with some of my wayward Democratic friends, passed a piece of legislation out of the House of Representatives that would lead to the destruction of the Delta, push aside every environmental law, and assert federal authority over California water law and the water laws of every western state. This is a major issue for California, one in which I have fought for more than 35 years, and I will not give up this fight. I will not allow the Delta to be destroyed.
Kim?
Well, first of all, let me just clear something up. My colleague has said that I support the peripheral canal. That is absolutely not true. I have never once said that I have supported it, and let me be clear, I do not support it. I haven't taken $40,000 from a Westland PAC. One of Congressman Garamendi's ranching colleagues, John Harris, had a fundraiser for me at Harris Ranch. My husband's family has been in the cattle industry for a number of years, and they've been associates of his for a number of years. He feels very strongly about my position on agriculture and water, so he was happy to support me. Look, I've been on the site's JPA to build a new reservoir for several years. Addressing this issue of water has to first be addressed with the issue of storage and creating a new supply. We have got to create a new supply of water. My home is Colusa County. This water comes from my home. My family's been in that area for 5 generations. There is no way, no how I would do harm to any of the farmers in this district by selling them out to Southern California Water Interest. And that's just false, and they know it's false. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying home. I'm running for this seat because this seat represents the area that I was born and raised in, and because this is my home. 80% of the money I have raised has come from inside the 3rd Congressional District. 5% of the money that Congressman Garamendi has raised has come from inside the 3rd Congressional District. So I always find it very interesting when these issues are brought up, when things that aren't true are said about me, because it all tends to go back to what Congressman Garamendi has or hasn't done. I will do everything I can to protect the farmers' water rights, to grow our supply of water, and to protect the Delta unconditionally.
Thank you. Kim, what are your thoughts about the Farm Bill that is still languishing in Congress?
Well, it's too bad that they couldn't get it out before a lame duck session. It has had tremendous reforms from the previous farm bill, previous farm bills. The commodity programs have been all but taken out of the farm bill. There is a number of insurance programs that need to be addressed for catastrophic disasters to our agricultural industry, like we've seen in the Midwest with the droughts. About 80–85% of the farm bill is still currently part of the SNAP program, the Food Stamp Assistance Program. One of my biggest concerns with that is how we are locally forced to implement that program. One concern is that there are no income or employment requirements, no proof that when you go in to receive benefits from this program that you don't have to prove your income level. I think we need to address that so we can address some of the fraud that's going on with that program. Because again, when 80–85% of the Farm Bill is that program, we need to make sure and do a good job that all our states are implementing that the way it should be and making sure we have control of the program so that there's not waste and fraud and abuse in the program. But look, food is a national security program. We don't ever want to come to a place where we are having to find water from another country or food from another country. Solano County has been able to keep about 85% of its land in active agricultural production through their good local policies. But one of the biggest impacts to that and how those things are going to change in the future is having industry like Campbell Soup out of Sacramento leave. That's an employer that adds value to our agricultural industry, especially tomato growers in Solano County that need those type of industries close to be able to sell their product. The best way to protect our agricultural lands is to make sure that we have the opportunities for them to get their products to market and to have more trade opportunities open to them. And that's one of the biggest things we need to look at in the future is how we are negotiating these trade agreements and how quickly we are opening up more markets to our ag community, because that'll be able to grow all the different ag industries so that the economies will be able to grow in these areas.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garamendi.
There are 2 farm bills. There's the Senate version of the Farm Bill, which passed with bipartisan support out of the Senate. And then there's the House version of the Farm Bill. This really goes back to the 47% issue. We have 25% of the children in America hungry today, going to bed hungry. This is an enormous American problem of hunger throughout our entire nation. And it's not just children. The House version makes a radical reduction in the food stamp program. It's not about fraud. It's not about abuse. It's really about a very significant reduction in the availability of the food stamp or SNAP program for people that are hungry, for children that are hungry. This is a 47% issue if there ever was one. Now, the House of Representatives, the Republicans, which control the House of Representatives, have been unable within their own caucus to move a farm bill out onto the floor. Now, they did an emergency farm bill that presumably would take care of those farmers in the Midwest that were suffering from the drought, but at the expense of farmers in this region who have benefited from the programs on the environmental side of it. the programs that provide the rice industry and other with additional income so that they can provide habitat for ducks and other creatures. I voted against that because it was a direct reduction in benefits to the farmers in this community. We need to get a farm bill out. Will we get it done after this election? I hope so, because there are people that are hungry in America that need assistance and need food. Yes, we will deal with the fraud that is available there and also in other programs, and we will continue to do so. But to reduce this program in such a way as to remove the ability of American children and adults to have adequate food is just plain wrong, and I won't go there. I want to go with the Senate version of the bill, which is a balanced, bipartisan version. Let's get that one out on the floor and let's vote on it.
Thank you. This one starts with Congressman Garamendi. Negative attack ads. Why do you feel the need to go there?
Anytime you point out the difference between your position and your opponent's position, it's the appropriate thing to do. Are those negative attack ads? They can be categorized that way, but there are differences in approach and there are differences in policy. Both of us are using those kinds of ads to point out differences in policy between myself and my opponent or my opponent and myself. And that's a long tradition in America. Now, there are attack ads on television, largely produced by secret super PACs whose money comes from we have no idea. Those secret attacks are very, very present in all of our television stations, and frankly, they are obnoxious. But I do think it's appropriate in advertising to point out in a legitimate way the difference between my view and my opponent's view. And we use that, and my opponent uses that process also. Now, there was an ad early on that had a certain chair and an issue about a chair. I got information from the county. It was wrong. We took that ad off and have gone forward with what we believe to be a correct ad on every issue.
Okay, thank you. Kim?
Well, you know, negative attack ads seem to be a par for the course anymore in politics, and it's too bad. My biggest concern with the attacks ads is when they just flat out lie. You know, we spend a tremendous amount of resources in our campaigns trying to get our message out and get our positive message out. And I know our campaign has worked really hard to contrast the difference between the Congressman and I by just pure voting record and the difference in between what we believe. We haven't talked about silly things like a chair, and my county didn't provide the wrong information. They provided the county budget, and that's what was asked for, and that's what was provided. So the lying and say, you know, I think it's irresponsible. I really do. When you have to lie about your opponent to run in a race, that just makes me believe that you don't have enough of your own record to stand on. There's no reason to lie about the Congressman. We have very different approaches to how to grow this economy and how to get our country back on track. And so I don't need to talk about things like a chair, because I'm sure over the past 40 years that the Congressman has been in office, he's sat in quite a few taxpayer chairs.
Well, let's make this very, very clear. The information that we did receive about this infamous chair came from the county. It was pointed out to us. Ms. Vann and her people pointed out that it was wrong. As soon as we had that information, we took that ad off. However, there was an issue here, and this is an issue about veterans. This is an issue about support for veterans, which I have supported veterans from my very earliest days in the legislature right up to this moment in every way possible. However, when Ms. Vann had an opportunity to support the veterans in her community, she turned it down, and she did, over a 2 or 3 year period, increase her own salary and turn the veterans down. Now, that's what happened. That is part of an ad that we do have up, and we'll continue to point out that my strong support for veterans, my own legislation on veterans, which would provide the Attorney General of the United States the opportunity to go after those predatory lenders that are out there, and at the same time, that same piece of legislation provides job opportunities for veterans. And I voted on every single veteran proposal that's come before the Congress.
Okay.
Can I?
Yes, I get it. You got a few extra minutes there, so you will too.
Well, you know, that again, it's a gross misrepresentation of what happened on the Veterans Hall issue up in Colusa County. You know, numerous veteran halls were built over the last 60 or so years. We have a Veterans Hall that was falling apart around our veterans and our seniors. And prior to me being on the Board of Supervisors, the building was red tagged and closed. We just can't put seniors, and veterans in a building that's falling down around them. We've invested resources in 2 other halls so that we could consolidate the locations so that everyone would have a good, safe location to do any of the veterans activities or the community activities they'd like to do. We have a wonderful transit system in our county that can get people wherever it needs to go. So investing in 2 really good centers was the best thing to do for our veterans so that they could all participate, so it wasn't isolated in one community. So again, it's an absolute gross misrepresentation. And look, the Oakland Center, where they process the veterans' claims, is the worst in the country. You know, the Congressman has had oversight over that for the past 3 years, and it has not gotten any better. It has gotten worse. Congressman Miller was just out here with me last week, and we were talking with veterans and all the issues that they're having with getting their claims processed through the Oakland Center. I mean, if you want to truly help veterans, you know, you could have held a field hearing in the last 3 years and addressed how Oakland is treating our veterans. That is a direct relationship to how Congress is taking care of our veterans, and it's deplorable.
Okay, no, I'm not Jim Laird.
Okay.
You now will each have a couple of minutes to give us your final thoughts and anything else that you think we should have addressed here today. And this will start with Kim. Anything we didn't ask you to address, and what do you want to make sure we understand about your positions?
Well, first of all, for anybody who would like more information about me or our campaign, we'd ask you to please join us at www.kimvann.com. And let me thank the editorial board and you for hosting today. It's very much appreciated. Look, you know, re-electing Congressman Garamendi, or electing him now into this new 3rd Congressional District, is basically approving a failed stimulus, overtaxing of our middle class, more regulatory policies, more government intervention, and a slowing of our economy. We have tried all of this over the last 3 years plus, and it's not working. The economy is not growing in the private sector like it should be. More jobs are not being created in Solano County and in the counties in this district. We have between a 12 and a 20% unemployment rate because of these policies. We have got to start getting the government out of the way so that we can allow the private sector to grow, which allows our overall base to grow, which allows people to have access to good jobs so that we can take care of ourselves and so that we can have better lives. You know, just because one person is wildly successful and, you know, I'll use myself as an example in the private sector, been mildly or moderately successful, we all build each other up. The bigger we can grow this economy, the stronger our country is, and the more available good jobs we have for everyone. And that's what this country is about, making sure that we all have the best opportunities. And turning the federal government into a micromanaging entity that consistently overreaches into our lives is not the way to do this. I've done it in Colusa County. We were able to get the government out of the way and build a wonderful power plant that enabled us to have additional resources to build a college so that our citizens had more access to education. And I will take those values and take those same ideas to Washington with me and start getting this country and this state back on the right path.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. I want to thank the editorial board, the newspaper, for giving us all an opportunity, more important, giving the public an opportunity to view what's going to be a very, very important election. There are 2 very, very different paths that are in place here. There are 7 dead Americans that wish there was a little more regulation of a compounding pharmacy in Massachusetts. We need to understand the regulatory system and its necessity for protecting us in very many different ways. And by the way, it was Ronald Reagan that instituted the air quality programs in California, got rid of the lead in gasoline. So regulation is and can be very, very good and very, very important. Getting government involved in the economy has been a tradition in America since George Washington, when Alexander Hamilton put together an industrial plan that is very, very similar to what we're proposing as Democrats, that we build the infrastructure, that we educate the population, that we engage in research, and that we use our tax money to support American businesses. We can do that. There is no reason in the world that we should allow our tax money to be spent on foreign-made equipment. My legislation would require that at least 85% of your tax money that is spent on wind turbines or solar systems or buses or trains be spent on American-made equipment so that Americans can go back to work. And let's understand that for the last 30 months, we have seen a growth month after month after month in the American private sector, small businesses and the like. I have voted, while in Congress, to reduce taxes on 97% of American small businesses. And those tax breaks are still in place. The Republicans would impose a tax increase of $1,000 on middle-class Americans and give the super wealthy at least a $160,000 break if they're earning $1 million or more. I love this job. It's extremely important to be able to use my experience here in California and across this nation and internationally in the multitude of issues that face Congress. I thank you once again. I ask the public for your support.
Thank you. That concludes our interview with the two congressional district candidates, and I thank you both for being here again. You will be able to find the recording of this question and answer session at www.thereporter.com/elections, and there you'll also find a host of other election information and interviews, candidate profiles, campaign financial information, etc. The Reporter is your source for local election coverage 24/7. Thank you.
Thank you.